This is Theology Bits, a ministry of Central Lutheran Church, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Pastor Ben. This is our second video on 1 John. So to clarify, it's not about 1 John chapter 2. It's the second video on 1 John. We're going to have 3 in this series. The first one was about light and darkness. This one is about ethics, how people should behave. And this is really interesting. Last time we talked about the relationship between the Gospel of John and 1 John. One thing that's a major interest in 1 John is ethics, how people should behave. It's not as if that was not there in the Gospel of John. It was there, but not to the extent that's here. The way it does it is very interesting. There's a lot of ways you can find a center, but I find it very helpful to think about this through the Greek term meno, which is the word for abide. Many of you know it from John chapter 15 with I am the vine and you are the branches. This is the Gospel of John chapter 15. And those who abide in me and I abide in them. It's a major phrase in the Gospel of John, to abide. And it means to have relationship, a mystical relationship with Jesus. And that, just as Jesus says, I and the Father are one, you and the community, Jesus and the community are also united. I am in you, I abide in you, and you abide in me. So that if you are in fellowship with Jesus, you are in fellowship with God the Creator. The wholeness of God is there present in Jesus. Used this term abide. But abide means meno, mean to remain, to stay, simply, but also can even have the sense of to endure. And that idea of enduring is going to be really valuable, and the emphasis that I find helpful for ethics. That is, how is abiding an ethical injunction? Well, I would argue that for 1 John it is. And that's because, if you recall from our previous video, that this is written to an internal community of followers of Jesus. This is not written so much to new converts. And that has consequence for the way in which one focuses on ethics, because they're not worried about new converts. Instead, remember, there were the people who had left the community. They called them the spirit of the Antichrist, and standard unfortunate church rhetoric. But those people who left versus those who have stayed, who have endured. And so what's the difference? Well, one is theological. Last time we talked about that. Those who denied that Jesus had come in the flesh. But the other seems to be about, well, in real life, where does that matter? Well, how do we live? What are the ethics? And so, how do you live a life of faith? This is more the interest in 1 John. And the focus then becomes fellowship in community. This is very important. This abiding language. Those of you who abide in God, must abide in fellowship. This is in chapter 1, where all of those who walk in the light have fellowship with one another. And if you have fellowship with us, you are having fellowship with Jesus. That is, the relationship between abiding in God and abiding in community are one and the same. That's the focus far more in 1 John than in the Gospel of John. You have an injunction in the Gospel of John. I give you a new command to love one another. But here, it is more than that, that it's not just an injunction, but to do that is to abide in God. So, for example, it makes the point that if you walk in the light, it says it multiple different ways, it is impossible for you to hate your sibling. And remember here, they're talking about an internal community in a life of faith. You cannot hate a brother or sister and be abiding in God. That is not a possible thing to do. It further says that when you see a sibling in need, you will be compelled to respond. Now, it doesn't say that if you don't do this, that Jesus won't have anything to do with you, but it just that this is a result of abiding in God, is abiding in fellowship. You cannot walk in the light and hate another. And then instead, the language is love. Very common Christian language, but this text goes farther, because this is very important. You need to love the sibling in Christ. But there's a reason why. Because the ethics, while this has more emphasis on ethics than many books of the New Testament, if you are looking for a list of do's and don'ts, this is not going to be your book. With so much emphasis on you cannot hate your sibling, you do not do the truth if you're walking the light but hating a brother or sister. So much emphasis on that, but it doesn't say specifically how. It doesn't give you the specific ways of, here is the way that you should behave in Christian community and this shouldn't, other than love. Well, there's a few reasons. One is, of course, real ethics are always situational. Nobody likes to call them relative because that term has been raised rather occupied territory, but it is absolutely situational ethics. It is every situation is different and everything relates to one another. It doesn't mean there is no guidelines, but that you are applying in a new place. And 1 John's not going to tell you every time what it is to apply. That's going to be different. But you do need to apply it. You need to live the love of God. And there's an important aspect here. Love the sibling because God is love. That's in 1 John 4, major emphasis. We do this not just because it's a good thing, but because this is the character of God. And the more we look at this, we start to see this. Where, for example, do what is right because God is righteous. You start to see doing what is right is righteous. Walk in the light because God is light. What are we seeing the pattern here? You, followers of Jesus, are like unto God. It even goes all the way to the end in chapter 3 that right now we can't see clearly. What we will be has not been revealed, but we know we will be like God, be transformed to be truly like God, because we will see God as God is. One of the most important passages in the New Testament for the first 6 centuries of Christianity, this focus on what is that transformation of the human to fully be like unto God, that we can't really know yet, that the image of God is fully revealed within a person. Well, right now, we know a few things. We know God is love. We know God is righteous. We know God is light. And so when we enact that, we are participating in God in this present age. And that is very different than just, well, we have a relationship with God here, and so therefore we should do these things, but we'll still have the relationship no matter what. No, it's if you are in relationship with God, then you will be acting and working in this, because those are the characteristics of God. I mean, it's been often pointed out that you'll notice the word good is almost the word God. Well, in English, that word was derived from God. That is to say, the things that we associate with who God is what we call good. Well, that is 1 John. That is, the things that we do that are right are consistent with who God is and our relationship with God. And it shows up with how we relate to one another in fellowship, in community. This is our second video in our Theology Bits series on 1 John. Look for the next one on sin and atonement. I'm Pastor Ben.